I'm Sara Fernández, and this is SEO in 2025.
Sara, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
So in 2025, and I hope that by now this doesn't come as a surprise, it's imperative to put the user at the forefront of any SEO strategy. And to do this effectively, we need to follow web accessibility best practices and have a clear understanding of what accessibility truly means.
Okay, have a true understanding of what accessibility truly means. How would you define accessibility?
So accessibility ensures that all the users, regardless of their physical, sensory, or cognitive abilities, can navigate and interact with a product or service. And this goes beyond compliance because it's about inclusivity and respect for all the users. Also very important to note that accessibility goes beyond including alt text in images, and it goes beyond visual impairments, because it includes and addresses a wide range of needs and how to tackle them. And yes, it's important also that we don't confuse the words disability and accessibility, because a person can have a disability, but if the environment is adapted to their needs, then it becomes accessible.
Got you, okay. So in 2025, just after we're recording this, the European Union will enforce the European Accessibility Act. So how would you summarise that, and what does that mean for SEOs?
So the European Accessibility Act is a directive of the European Union, and it's going to apply to all digital and products and services, both public and private. And non-compliance with this act can lead to significant fines and legal repercussions. It could be like similar to those that we've seen with GDPR violations. And in order to make our sites truly accessible, so these guidelines are still, we still don't know exactly what are they going to take into account for this, but chances are that the first resource they're going to see to have a look at is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, also known as WCAG, which are the international standards for accessible web content. And they provide a framework for making websites perceptible, operable, understandable, and robust for all the users. They have a very thorough list of principles. And there are different levels that we can achieve in these guidelines, different levels of compliance. These guidelines say that achieving at least an AA level, which would be like the second level, is the recommended for most businesses. In terms of okay, if you achieve this level, you are compliant, and there be a third level, but it's a bit more difficult.
So what would you say to a business that's based in the States or somewhere else around the world that's not in the European Union, and they're thinking, this legislation doesn't apply to me?
So just because it doesn't apply to you doesn't mean that in your country or region there may not be similar guidelines. Maybe there are, or maybe it's just a matter of time. And it's still important for businesses to take into account all these guidelines anyway, because it's important that we provide the online experience with our product or service should be the same for everybody. Everybody should be able to interact with our product or service the same way. And it's important for these businesses to take into account, as I was saying earlier, that we're not just talking about visual impairments and alt text. It goes beyond. So there are things that I would recommend to these businesses to start looking at and to identify, because we have a long series of disabilities, for example, cognitive disabilities. So for this, it's important that we provide clear and simple content to help people with any kind of cognitive challenge, levels of literacy as well, understand and navigate websites more easily. So if we have a very technical niche website and we have terminology that is a bit difficult to understand, we should always provide brief definitions, links to resources to expand information. We also have auditory disabilities. For those, if we have a video, it's important that we provide transcripts and captions to make sure that users who have difficulties to listen can watch those videos as well. Also, temporary and situational disabilities, which often we are not aware, but they also exist, that sometimes there could be situations, temporary situations, like, for example, a parent holding a baby. They may need to use voice commands, or when someone is in a noisy environment, again, they cannot listen to a video and they may need captions to be able to follow that video, no? But even, for example, when someone is in a foreign country on holidays and they struggle to communicate with locals, that's a situational impairment. So all the support that you provide to those users, that's how you make their experience more accessible.
Absolutely. And going back to what we were saying earlier on, even if a business is based somewhere else outside the European Union, if they're wanting to do business in the EU, serve customers in there as well, then they have to think of that legislation as well.
Exactly. Because, well, looking at the European Union alone, there are already 101 million people with disabilities. That's a lot of users. So when we design and we do SEO for accessibility, because here SEO and UX go hand in hand, so it's important we take into account both. Well, we'll be helping our business reach a larger market while improving our brand reputation and also our customer loyalty, because we will be able to make our product or service more available to more people. And in the end, we have to take into account also that SEO, Google, search engines favor accessible websites. So beyond compliance, beyond legislation, overall, the impact is positive in terms of business and also performance.
And you talked about the readability of your website as well, and there's different readability sites that you can go to. The UK government actually recommends that the age that you should aim at is 9 years old, apparently, with the text that you have on websites. And if it's aimed at a higher level, then it might not be accessible for everyone. Is that roughly the same age everywhere? And where would you go to actually check how readable your website is?
That's a good standard. And as I said, every country, region could have their own legislation and guidelines. But yes, that's something that definitely it's a good indicator. And we should never assume that, for example, let's say I am an SEO. So if I'm using a tool or new resource, I don't need any kind of like walkthrough in this new app, or like additional links to understand what I'm using. I just thought of Sidebolt, for example. It's a good example of tool that when you're performing an audit, everything that the tool marks includes links to like definitions. What is this? Why is this important? And that for anyone who, is also in has a different level of knowledge, is also very useful for them to, okay, I'm performing this audit. Perhaps I'm not very technical, or these things I'm not very familiar with them, but I have these resources at hand that make sure that I can understand this audit and that I can report these issues to my clients.
And of course, you've got temporary disabilities and situational impairments as well.
Yes, exactly. As I said, for example, if you break your arm, that's something temporary. So being able to use a website with voice commands, and also being able to navigate through a website with the keyboard without needing a mouse. And as I said, if you are in an environment where people are speaking a language that you cannot speak and they can't speak English, then you have a temporary situational disability. And this way of classifying disabilities comes from Microsoft. So it's called Microsoft Inclusive Design Guidelines. Actually, it's a Microsoft Inclusive Design. So if you Google it, you'll find how they classify disabilities. And basically, they are inside 3 groups. So these are permanent, temporary, or situational. And inside of each group, you have all the disabilities.
So using inclusive language is obviously an important part of accessibility as well then?
Yes, exactly. Both the language and the design, the layout of the websites as well. So using plain language to accommodate users with varying literacy levels and different levels of expertise, avoiding jargon and complex terms, or if you need to use them, defining them. And this is important for those levels of expertise, but also if you use very advanced words, let's say in English, and a non-native speaker is reading that content, they could struggle. They could have a cognitive limitation as well. And also ensuring high contrast between text and backgrounds, providing, of course, alt text. Just because I said accessibility is not just about alt text doesn't mean alt text is not a big part of it. And apart from that, well, thankfully apart from these guidelines, there are also different tools that we can use and different ways to check as well.
So if you're talking to someone about helping to make their website more accessible and they say to you, look, it's a nice to have, it's not the most important thing, I should be focusing on other things instead, what would you say to them to persuade them that accessibility, focusing on accessibility is probably one of the most important things to do?
So apart from the legal impact that it could have, well, I think it's important that we understand that, it's not just a legal and ethical obligation, it's a smart business strategy, because when you're making your website accessible, you're creating a better user experience for all visitors, and you'll be increasing your reach, you'll enhance your brand's reputation. It's important that we create inclusive spaces where everyone, regardless of their abilities, can access and interact with digital content easily and effectively. And it's true that sometimes if you tell a stakeholder that is in charge of these decisions, oh, you have to follow these guidelines, these long documents, probably they are not going to listen. But the good thing is that we have so many tools that we can use to audit our websites. And these tools include, for example, a tool called Wave that is great for accessibility checking, Lighthouse as well. But even Sitebulb itself that I mentioned just a while ago, in their audits, they also have like an accessibility audit that's actually quite good as well. And apart from Lighthouse, Firefox, for example, also has like in their dev tools, they have an accessibility section as well. And it's possible there could be more and more tools coming with this European law enforcement. So yeah, but we already have a few resources there.
How do you measure the business benefits of improving accessibility?
It's we can have a look at different metrics: the time on page, the reduced bounce rates, higher conversion rates, because we'll be able to reach more users. So these metrics, we could see a benefit in them, and also better rankings, because Google is going to see, and other search engines are going to see that we are covering all these aspects. So our rankings would improve already, should improve already. But also something more qualitative metric that we should look into, or any qualitative data, any surveys that we provide to users where they give us feedback, that could also be a good indicator. And also the Net Promoter Score. And if you have that measures the level of satisfaction, and you have a high Net Promoter Score, it indicates that users are more likely to recommend the site to others. And then you would see that those accessibility enhancements are benefiting them because they're happy with their experience. And yeah, you could go, if you really want to know, you could go more granular. You could ask in those surveys specific questions to them, like, if you really want to have more feedback, more detailed feedback. And also something that, apart from the tools, something that I forgot to mention, actually, it's important to test with real users as well. So here we would be testing different devices and browsers to make sure that the content, everything displays correctly and is accessible. And when testing with users, very important as well, we should include participants with disabilities, different abilities, not just users that don't have any kind of impairment. And apart from those surveys, we could do any kind of test or focus group. And if we don't know how to find these users, well, there are resources, like you could go through, reach out to NGOs, schools, support groups related to different disabilities. On social media, for example, on Facebook, you can find some of these groups. And you could reach out to users in these groups to be able to test with them.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time focusing on accessibility in 2025?
So I think that as SEOs, and this is a mistake that I often make myself as well, is when we see an issue, we want to fix it. And it's important that we prioritize all the fixes we want to do based on our business objectives, but also hopefully these business objectives also take into account the user experience and what's best for the users. So it's important that when we find issues or areas of improvement, that we prioritize them, that we set these priorities very clearly, and that we make our fixes accordingly. And yes, accessibility is going to be even more crucial in 2025, and hopefully that's part of like the strategies that will be implemented in the coming months as well.
Sara Fernández Carmona is an international SEO consultant, and you can find her over at sara-fernandez.com. Sara, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Thank you very much, David. It was a pleasure.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at seoin2025.com.